The rain poured over Seoul that night like silver tears, washing the neon lights into rivers of color. Deep inside the hidden world of the city, where fear and power ruled, sat Jae-hoon Kong, the man everyone called the Phantom, a ruthless mafia boss with eyes sharp as a blade. He was a legend whispered about in alleyways and boardrooms alike. But tonight, Jae-hoon wasn't thinking about power. He was thinking about her. Salam, the quiet, innocent Ethiopian girl who had stumbled into his dark world only once, and left him haunted ever since. It had been 3 months since that night. 3 months since she'd come to his mansion, trembling and lost, looking for her cousin who worked there. 3 months since he'd found her hiding from the storm, her wide brown eyes shining with fear and something deeper, something that had made his heart stumble for the first time in years. And that one night, that one mistake, he had kissed her. A soft, accidental, desperate kiss. One that neither of them had forgotten. Now, under the dim light of his private room, she stood again before him, fragile in a plain white dress, her hands clutching the hem nervously. Jae-hoon leaned back in his chair, his voice low. "You shouldn't have come here, Salam. You don't belong in my world." Her eyes glistened. "I know, but my heart didn't listen." He frowned, trying to remain cold, untouchable. But her voice, soft and trembling, broke through his armor. Salam stepped closer. Her scent, faint and sweet, drifted to him like a memory. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you know what your kiss did to me that night?" Jae-hoon froze, his hand tightening on the edge of the table. "It stole my heart," she whispered, her eyes wet with tears she refused to let fall. "You probably forgot it the moment I left, but I didn't. Every morning, I woke up hearing your voice. Every night, I dreamed of the way you looked at me before you kissed me. It wasn't just a kiss, Jae-hoon. It was everything." He stared at her. This girl who had no reason to come back, who had every reason to hate his world, yet stood before him trembling with love. "Salam," he said hoarsely. "You don't understand who I am. I destroy everything I touch." She shook her head and took one more step forward, now standing right before him. Her hand, small and soft, rested on his chest. "Then destroy me, Jae-hoon, because I'm already yours." The words struck him like thunder. For years, Jae-hoon had lived in the shadows, never trusting, never feeling. But in her eyes, he saw something no gun, no gold, no fear could give him: peace. He lifted her chin gently. "You think one kiss can change a life?" Salam smiled faintly, her tears finally falling. "It changed mine." And before he could stop himself, he pulled her into his arms, not as the ruthless mafia boss, but as a man who had finally been undone by love. Their foreheads touched. The city roared outside, but in that moment, time stood still. "Then let me give you another," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Not to steal your heart this time, but to promise you mine." And as he kissed her again, slow, deep, trembling, the Phantom of Seoul was no more. Only Jae-hoon remained, a man reborn in the arms of the woman who had whispered her love into his darkness. The night after her confession, Jae-hoon couldn't sleep. He stood at the tall glass window of his penthouse, watching Seoul glitter beneath him. A city of power, money, and blood. He had built it all with his hands, one deal, one betrayal at a time. But now all he could think of was her voice. Soft, steady, unafraid. "Then destroy me, Jae-hoon, because I'm already yours." That sentence replayed in his mind like a vow and a curse. Salam, meanwhile, sat in the guest room, her heart racing. The memory of his kiss still burned on her lips, tender yet fierce, as if he had tried to seal the world away. She didn't understand why she loved him. He was in danger, wrapped in silence. But she had seen something in him that others missed. A loneliness behind his cold eyes, a man desperate to feel alive again. When morning came, she found him in the kitchen, still in the same black shirt, dark circles under his eyes. He looked up as she entered, coffee cup in hand. "You should go back home, Salam," he said quietly, "before my world swallows you whole." She smiled faintly, moving closer. If your world swallows me, then at least I'll be close to you. He turned away sharply, jaw clenched. You don't know what you're saying. Then show me, she whispered. Show me what you're afraid of. For a long time he said nothing. Then he set the cup down and reached for her hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes were uncertain, almost vulnerable. If you stay, you'll see things that will make you hate me. She looked into his eyes, her voice trembling but steady. I could never hate the man whose kiss made me believe in love again. Jihoon exhaled, the sound of surrender. He pulled her close, his forehead pressing against hers. You make it hard to breathe, Salam. She smiled softly. Then breathe with me. From that day, the mansion changed. The men who worked for Jihoon whispered about the foreign girl who dared to look him in the eyes. They watched in disbelief as the boss who never smiled began to linger in the garden, sitting silently beside her while she read or hummed soft Amharic songs. Sometimes, late at night, he'd stand by her door, listening to her voice through the wall, singing in a language he didn't understand but felt in his soul. She was light, he was a shadow, and somehow they met in the middle. But peace never lasts in the world of men like Jihoon. One evening, his right-hand man rushed in, panic in his voice. Boss, the Han cartel found out about her. They're coming. Jihoon's blood ran cold. He turned to Salam, who had just entered the room, confusion in her eyes. What's wrong? She asked softly. He didn't answer. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. His heartbeat thundered against her ear. You need to leave now. She pushed back, tears forming. No, I won't leave you. Salam, please, he said hoarsely. If anything happens to you. She silenced him with a trembling hand on his lips. You said your kiss was a promise, so keep it. Don't send me away. Jihoon closed his eyes, breaking apart inside. He had faced death 100 times without fear, but the thought of losing her, that terrified him. He kissed her forehead slowly, as if memorizing her. Then stay behind me, he whispered. And whatever happens, don't let go. That night, chaos erupted. Gunfire echoed across the dark courtyard. Jihoon fought like a man possessed. Every strike, every bullet, for her. And through the noise, Salam clung to his back, refusing to run. When it was over, when the smoke cleared and silence fell again, Jihoon fell to his knees, wounded but alive. Salam dropped beside him, her hands shaking as she touched his face. You're hurt, she cried, tears streaming. He smiled weakly, blood at the corner of his lip. I told you not to let go. She held him, sobbing into his shoulder. You saved me. No, he whispered. You saved me long before tonight. Weeks later, Jihoon recovered, and the world finally saw the man no one believed existed. A mafia boss walking through the flower market, holding the hand of an Ethiopian woman who smiled at him like he was worth saving. He'd left part of his empire behind, burned bridges, and turned enemies into ghosts. For the first time in his life, Jihoon Kong was free, not because he escaped danger, but because love had made him human again. As they stood by the Han River one evening, she leaned against him, watching the water sparkle under the sunset. Jihoon, she whispered, do you remember that first kiss? He smiled, brushing a strand of her hair from her face. How could I forget? It stole your heart. She looked up, eyes glowing. And gave you mine. He kissed her again. Gentle this time, no longer desperate, just full of promise. And as the city lights flickered around them, their shadows blended. One heart, one whisper, one forever. The world thought Jihoon Kong had vanished. After the night of blood and fire, his empire crumbled like ashes in the rain. Rivals searched for him, police hunted his name, but all they found were whispers. Rumors that the Phantom of Soul had fallen in love and disappeared. They were right. He had vanished into her arms. For months, Jihoon and Salam lived quietly in the countryside outside Busan. Their home was small, surrounded by green hills and the scent of wild jasmine. Jihoon learned to fix fences and plant vegetables, things he'd never done in his life. Salam, in her white dresses and soft laughter, became his dawn. She taught him Amharic words, simple ones that sounded like prayer when she said them. "Salam," he murmured once, resting his head on her lap. "What does fakir mean?" She smiled gently, her fingers combing through his dark hair. "It means love, but not just any love, the kind that forgives everything." He looked up at her, eyes full of quiet awe. "Then that's what you gave me." When winter came, Jehun began to rebuild his life in secret, not as a mafia lord, but as a man. He used hidden funds to start a small construction company under another name. Salam helped, keeping books, smiling at his workers, cooking for them. Everyone thought she was his wife already. But one evening, while they sat by the fire, Salam looked up at him, eyes shining in the firelight. "Jehun, do you ever think about marriage?" He paused, staring at the flames. "Every day," he said softly. Then, reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver ring, elegant, unpolished, but real. "I was waiting for the right moment," he said quietly. "But maybe the right moment is any moment I'm with you." Her breath caught. Tears welled up as he knelt before her, his voice trembling. "Salam Tesfaye, I've destroyed kingdoms and built empires. But the only thing I ever want to build now is a life with you. Will you marry me?" Her hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Jehun," she whispered, "you already stole my heart long ago. You can keep it forever." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he kissed her hand, then her lips, tenderly, reverently. That night, they stayed up till dawn, laughing, talking about dreams, whispering promises they never thought they'd live to make. A week later, they married in secret at a small church overlooking the sea. No guests, no photographers, no flowers. Just the sound of waves and a priest who didn't ask questions. Salam wore a cream dress she had sewn herself. Jehun wore a black suit, the same one from the night they met. When he lifted her veil, the world seemed to stop. "You're the first good thing that ever happened to me," he whispered. "And you're the man I prayed for without even knowing your name," she replied. They exchanged vows, hers spoken softly in Amharic, his trembling in Korean. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Jehun pulled her close and kissed her like the world had finally made sense. That night, the moonlight poured through the window of their small cottage, silver and quiet. Salam lay in his arms, her head resting on his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. "You're really mine now," he murmured, tracing circles on her skin. "I was always yours," she said with a sleepy smile. "Even before I met you." He kissed her forehead. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving everything behind?" She looked up at him, her eyes full of peace. "No, because everything I ever wanted is lying right here." Outside, the sea whispered against the shore, soft, endless, forgiving. Months later, Jehun registered his business officially under a new name, Salam Construction Group. He built homes for families who had lost everything, a way to pay for the lives he once destroyed. And every evening, Salam would wait for him by the porch, watching the sunset, her heart swelling as he walked toward her. Sometimes he'd stop behind her, wrap his arms around her waist, and whisper against her ear, "Remember when you said my kiss stole your heart?" She'd turn, "I do." "You were wrong," he'd say, pressing his lips to hers. "It was you who stole mine." Years later, they returned to Seoul, not as the phantom and the girl who defied him, but as Mr. and Mrs. Kong, a quiet couple who ran a charity for street children. No one knew who he used to be. No one knew how close he once stood to the edge. But every night, when the city lights faded, Jehun would hold her close and whisper, "You were the light I was meant to find." And she'd smile, placing a kiss on his chest. "And you were the shadow I was brave enough to love." Of course, Red Heart, here's the final part of Whisper of the Heart, a tender and emotional conclusion that shows Salam and Jehun's peaceful life years later. Their love maturing, deepening, and lasting forever. 15 years had passed. The man the world once feared had become a quiet name on a list of forgotten legends. And in a modest house by the sea, Jehun Kong woke each morning to the smell of coffee, the sound of laughter, and the soft hum of Amharic songs. His wife's voice, still as gentle as the first night, she whispered to him. Salam stood by the window, sunlight on her face, her long hair streaked faintly with gold. Beside her, a little boy of 10 was drawing waves on a notebook, his eyes bright and curious. Mina's, their son, and in the next room, their teenage daughter, Hannah, practiced piano, her melody filling the air like a promise. Jehun leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a quiet smile softening the edges of his once ruthless face. "You're teaching him to draw the sea again?" he teased. Salam looked over her shoulder, grinning. The sea is patient. It reminds him that everything moves in waves, even life. He crossed the room and kissed her forehead. "You always find a way to turn lessons into poetry. And you always find a way to make trouble sound like wisdom," she replied, nudging him playfully. He laughed, something he never thought he'd do so freely. That evening, as the children slept, they sat outside on the porch wrapped in a single blanket. The sea breeze was cool, carrying the scent of salt and wildflowers. Jehun held her hand, tracing her wedding ring with his thumb. "Salam," he murmured. "Do you ever think about the night we met?" She smiled, eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I think about it every time you hold me. You were a man no one dared to touch, but I still whispered to you." He chuckled softly. "You weren't afraid." "I was terrified," she admitted. "But your eyes, they were lonelier than mine." Silence stretched between them, warm and full. He looked at her, really looked, and still couldn't believe she was real. "You saved me," he said. "From myself, from everything." Salam leaned closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you gave me a home, not the walls, Jehun. You, fear. But now." He turned to her, a small smile curving his lips. "Now I think they're just heaven's way of washing away the past." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "We survived the storm, Jehun, and look where it brought us." He looked at her, eyes filled with the same awe he felt 15 years ago. "To you," he said, "always to you." She leaned in, pressing her lips to his, a kiss soft and full of memory. It wasn't the desperate fire of youth, but the steady warmth of a love that had weathered everything. The next morning, sunlight poured through the window, golden and kind. Salam opened her eyes to find Jehun still holding her hand in his sleep. For a long time, she just watched him. The man who had once been a shadow, now at peace in the light. She whispered softly, just as she had the night they met. "Your kiss stole my heart forever." His eyes fluttered open, and he smiled drowsily. "And you've had mine ever since." As the years went on, their love became a quiet legend, not of power or danger, but of redemption. A story told in whispers about a ruthless man who found salvation in a girl's gentle courage. And every evening, as the sun sank below the waves, Jehun and Salam would walk along the beach, fingers intertwined, hearts beating in the same rhythm, proving that even in the darkest worlds, love can find its way home. The sea had grown quieter with age, or maybe it was just Jehun and Salam who had learned to listen better. Their children were grown now, chasing their own dreams and soul, leaving the small coastal house to the two souls who had built it with love and forgiveness. It was early evening. The sky blushed with the fading sun, casting gold across the waves. Salam stood barefoot on the sand, her white shawl fluttering in the wind. Jehun, now silver-haired but still broad-shouldered, walked toward her slowly, carrying 2 cups of tea. He smiled when she turned, that same shy smile he had the first night she whispered to him in the mansion long ago. "You still look at me like I'm the only man in the world," he teased. She took the cup from him and sipped. "Because you are," she said softly. He laughed, low and warm, setting his cup aside. "All these years, and you still say things that stop my heart." "That's because it's still mine," she whispered. He stepped closer, his hand finding hers. The years had changed them, lined their faces, slowed their steps. But when their eyes met, it was still that same first night, that same rush, that same certainty. Jihun brushed his thumb over her cheek. Do you remember how afraid I was to love you? Salam nodded gently. And how brave you became when you finally did. He smiled, eyes wet. You taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the only thing strong enough to make a man put down his gun and pick up a flower. She leaned her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Slower now, but still strong. And you taught me that even the darkest heart can learn to bloom. They stood there as the sky deepened to violet, the waves kissing the shore like an old song. Jihun lifted her chin, his voice tender. You know, Salam, that night you said my kiss stole your heart. Yes, she whispered, smiling. I think it was the other way around. You kissed me with your soul, and I've never been the same. She smiled, her eyes shining like stars. Then let's keep stealing from each other. He laughed quietly, his forehead resting against hers. For eternity. Their lips met, soft, slow, and full of the years they had lived together. It wasn't a kiss of fire anymore, but of forever. The sea breeze wrapped around them, and for a moment, time stopped. Later, as the moon rose, they sat together wrapped in one blanket, their fingers intertwined. Jihun looked up at the stars. When I'm gone one day, promise me something. She turned to him. Don't speak like that. He smiled faintly. Promise me you'll still sing, even if I'm not here to hear it. Her voice trembled. And if I sing, will you hear me? He placed her hand over his heart. Always. Tears glimmered in her eyes as she kissed him again, slow and tender. A kiss that carried every memory, every promise, every heartbeat they had ever shared. And somewhere between the whisper of the sea and the shimmer of moonlight, they stayed, two souls who had once met in the dark and found the light together. Night had fallen softly over the coast. The sea shimmered like melted glass under the moonlight, and the wind whispered through the palms outside their window. Inside the little cottage, the air carried the warmth of a quiet fire, its glow painting the room in gold. Jihun and Salam sat close on the couch, a single blanket draped around their shoulders. Her head rested against his chest, and his hand traced slow, absent circles on her back. The world outside was silent, but their hearts spoke in their own rhythm. Steady, unhurried, eternal. Salam lifted her head slightly, looking up at him. His hair had turned silver, but his eyes still held that fierce tenderness that once frightened the world. Do you ever wonder, she murmured, how something so dangerous turned into something this gentle? He smiled, his voice low and husky. Because you touched it. You took the storm and made it a heartbeat. She reached up and cupped his face. Her fingers trembled as they brushed his jaw. She could feel the years beneath her touch. I never stopped falling for you, Jihun. Every day in a different way. He caught her hand, kissed it softly. And I never stopped thanking heaven for that one night. The night you whispered instead of running. Her eyes filled, but not with sorrow. With something softer. Gratitude, wonder, love too deep for words. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his cheek. Kiss me again. Not because we're young, but because we still remember what forever feels like. He did, slowly, tenderly, the kind of kiss that doesn't belong to youth, but to souls that have grown old together and still tremble with the same ache they felt the first time. Her fingers tangled in his hair as their foreheads touched. He breathed her in, the faint scent of jasmine, the same perfume she wore when they first met. You smell like home, he whispered. That's because you are home, she answered. They stayed like that, hearts pressed together, their breaths mingling with the sound of the sea. The room around them faded. There was no time, no past, no fear. Just two people who had once fought the world and now had nothing left to fight. Only to love. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled through her tears. If I die before you, she whispered, promise you'll watch the sunrise for me. He took her face in his hands, his eyes glistening. And if I go first, promise you'll whisper to the sea, I'll hear it wherever I am. She nodded slowly, resting her forehead against his. We've crossed through storms, Jihun. We can cross that one too. Later that night, as the fire dimmed, Jihun pulled her close to bed. Her fingers traced the scars on his chest, scars that once told stories of violence, now softened by peace. He kissed her hair, whispering against her skin. Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't need to be loud to be strong. And thank you, she murmured back, for loving me so completely I forgot what fear felt like. Their hands intertwined under the blanket. A perfect fit even after all these years. Outside, the ocean breathed against the shore like a lullaby. Inside, two souls rested in each other's arms. He murmured. She laughed quietly, resting her forehead against his. We make a perfect balance then. He nodded, squeezing her hand. We always did. That day they walked along the beach together. Their pace was slower now, but their hands still fit perfectly, the same warmth, the same quiet pulse. Children ran past them, waves kissed their feet, and gulls flew low over the water. Jihun stopped for a moment, looking out at the horizon. Salam, he said. When we first met, I never believed love could last. I thought it was something people made up to feel safe. She looked at him, eyes full of sunlight. And now, he smiled. Now I know love doesn't end. It only changes shape. She reached up and cupped his face gently. Then if one day we can't walk side by side, we'll still walk together, just in a different way. He kissed her forehead, holding her close as the waves touched their feet. I'll always find you, Salam, in every sunrise, in every whisper of the sea. Years passed, and their house filled again. Not with children this time, but with visits, laughter, and stories. Hannah's daughter would sit on Jihun's lap and ask, Grandpa, is it true you were a hero? He'd chuckle and point to Salam. No, my little one. She was the hero. She saved me when I didn't want to be saved. And Salam would shake her head, smiling. We saved each other. One winter evening, Jihun sat by the window, the sea beyond it calm and silver. Salam came behind him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. He looked up at her with a tired smile. It's getting cold. She kissed his temple. Then we'll keep each other warm. He took her hand, held it tightly. Promise me something? She nodded. Anything. When I can't say your name anymore, say it for me. So I'll never forget who I am. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. You'll never forget, Jihun, because you're part of me. He rested his head against her chest, listening to her heartbeat. Then I'll live in that sound forever. The next morning, the sun rose softly over the sea. The world was quiet. The ocean moved in slow, silver waves. Inside the little house, 2 cups of tea sat on the table. One was still steaming. Salam sat beside Jihun, her fingers wrapped around his hand. His face was peaceful, the faintest smile still on his lips, as if he were dreaming of her. She leaned close and whispered the words that had begun their story. Your kiss stole my heart forever. And though he no longer answered, she felt it. The warmth still there, the love that would not fade. She pressed her lips to his forehead, her tears falling softly. And I'll carry yours until we meet again. Years later, people still spoke of them. The quiet couple by the sea who lived and loved fiercely, whose story was written not in grand gestures, but in whispers, kindness, and devotion. And sometimes, on calm evenings, when the wind moved just right, villagers swore they could hear laughter. A man's deep voice and a woman's soft song, blending with the rhythm of the waves. Because love like theirs doesn't end. It only finds a new way to be heard. Sure, here's a quiet continuation that carries the story forward without breaking what's already there. It stays focused on how Salam's love continues after Jihun's passing and how, in time, that love ripens into peace. Spring came again. The jasmine outside the cottage bloomed so thick that its scent carried all the way down to the shore. Salam tended the garden every morning. She still made 2 cups of tea, one she set beside the empty chair on the porch. People from the village stopped by often. They brought her fresh bread, or just sat with her while she told stories about the man who once built houses for strangers and always came home smelling of sawdust and sea air. When she spoke his name, she smiled. It no longer hurts. It was simply a word that opened the door to memory. At night, she would sit by the open window, the waves a low hum beyond the dunes. She had grown used to talking to him in that sound. "Jehoon," she would whisper. "Hannah's little girl has your eyes, and Mina's finally finished that boat you started." The wind would stir, a soft breath across her cheek. She liked to think it was his answer. One evening, she walked to the edge of the water. The horizon glowed orange, and the tide came in slow and steady, touching her feet like an old friend. In her hands she carried a small wooden box, Jehoon's tools, worn smooth from years of work. She knelt and let them fall gently into the surf. "You built a life for us," she said. "Now the sea can carry your hands wherever they're needed." When she stood again, she felt lighter. The wind lifted her shawl, wrapping it around her like an embrace. Years slipped quietly by. Salam's hair turned the same silver as the sea. She wrote letters to her children, to their children, always ending them the same way. "Remember to love bravely. That's how we survive the storms." And one clear morning, when the first light touched the waves, the villagers found her asleep in her chair on the porch, a smile on her lips, the sound of the ocean still in her ears. Beside her was a note, written in her delicate hand. "He's been waiting at the water's edge. I'm just going to see him." They buried her beside Jehoon, under the jasmine tree. Every spring, the flowers fall across their names and roll toward the sea like tiny white sails. Visitors say the breeze there feels different, softer somehow. And if you close your eyes, you can almost hear two voices, a man's and a woman's, whispering to each other between the waves. Love doesn't end. It becomes the air we breathe, the tide that never stops returning home. Episode 1 ends here. The next episode comes up soon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.